Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host, Michael Howard, the head of marketing at InfoTools. Today, we're joined by Mario Carrasco, co-founder and principal of ThinkNow, a technology-driven cultural insights agency. ThinkNow enables companies and government agencies to discover the cultural drivers that influence consumer decisions. We provide insight solutions to help organizations thrive in a changing demographic environment. During his 12-year tenure at ThinkNow, Carrasco's expert knowledge of multicultural consumers and his passion for unveiling the story behind the numbers is evident in his editorial contributions to Forbes, eMarketer, Quirk's magazine, online MR magazine, and MediaPost. Thanks for joining us on the show, Mario.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
You're welcome. So, Mario, what's the most significant thing you're going to share with us today?
Wow, that's a big question. I think the most significant thing I'll share with you is kind of from a trend perspective, the intersection of technology, AI, data privacy, all coming in convergence with the rise of multicultural consumers in the US, I think is really kind of the biggest takeaway we'll have from this conversation.
Exciting. Looking forward to getting stuck into that. So can you, one of the bits which you've talked about technology-wise, the sunsetting of cookies, rather.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling us what exactly this is?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we're in the market research industry, and so not necessarily a big impact on the market research industry, but the sunsetting of cookies is going to affect a large industry, which is digital advertising. And so I guess for those not familiar with cookies, let's start there, right?
Yeah.
Cookies are a snippet of code that marketers and advertisers embed on our browsers, on our mobile devices, computers, laptops, to be able to target us better, right? So everybody's familiar, right? You search for a certain shirt or headphones one time, and you're bombarded with ads where you searched it, of course, but then cross-device. If you go on your home laptop where you search for a shirt, but then you go on your work laptop and you start to see advertisements for the same shirt that you Googled on a different device, that's typically derived from cookies. And so as concerns around data privacy have started to grow among consumers, you see companies start to react to those concerns by rolling out more and more strict data policies. I think Apple is really on the forefront of that. They've actually already done away with cookies on their devices. And the sunsetting of cookies refers to the next big company that utilizes cookies in advertising, which is Google. So cookies were actually meant to sunset, I want to say 2 years ago, but because there's such a large industry, specifically digital advertising, that's invested in seeing cookies live on, they've been putting that sunsetting away. And so now we're at 2024 is the timeline that cookies will go away. And I believe this is the last time that Google is going to be, moving that goalpost in terms of when it's going to end. But this is a significant shift in an industry, right? I think taking it an analogy to the market research industry, it's like if we did away with, being able to collect, demographic information for panelists, right? This would fundamentally shift our industry, and that's what's happening in digital advertising.
Yeah, for sure. I do apologize to our listeners for getting a little bit technical, but it's going to help our conversation today as well. Zero-party data. Can you give us a quick understanding of what that is?
Yeah, zero-party data is a relatively new term, but it's essentially data that consumers have opted in to give. And this is something that all market researchers are very familiar with, right? You can think of zero-party data really is all of the data that we gather in the market research industry via things like surveys. Different from third-party data, which is typically what like a cookie. This is passively collected. You don't necessarily opt in to share your information. There's no explicit consent to your information to be shared. Zero-party data is the opposite. There is an explicit exchange and from the respondent and the company that's gathering that data. And so that's why it's called zero-party data, and that there is no intermediary party. It's someone explicitly sharing information. And so, again, the best example of that is survey data, but it doesn't necessarily have to be survey data. It could be things like a rewards program for a specific retailer, right? You opt in and explicitly share information with that company or brand in exchange for discounts. In the market research industry, it's in exchange for incentives. So that's another defining factor of zero-party data outside of the consent. There is typically some sort of exchange, whether it be an incentive or a discount or something of that nature.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the other side of the episode today we're just discussing is the US becoming a majority multicultural nation, and I guess you're seeing that that happen around the world as well. So what does this mean for society, just in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, right, marketing at its core is about connecting with people's culture and value. And if we take the US, for example, there has been a group that's been the largest group for a long time in the US. So much of our marketing and research has been around reaching this particular group. And that group is changing at a rapid pace. And so a lot of the cultural cues and values that we've relied on historically are shifting. And so I think for marketing, that means really shifting how we think about consumers, what they value, cultural backgrounds. And so that's why we really feel like research is such a critical part of reaching out to this new consumer. And so just like some statistics, right? I mean, Gen Z, for example, the youngest generation that are consumers right now, it's the most multicultural generation in the US history. And we've never really experienced a demographic shift like that in any generation. And then globally, we are having a shift as well. So yeah, I mean, I think there's big implications, not only from a marketing standpoint, from a marketing research standpoint, and engaging and learning about these new consumers, for brands to be able to make their products and services more relevant to this multicultural consumer.
Well, that's right. So if we think about the two topics, we've had the changes in technology that we're seeing, and also this multicultural evolution, I guess, of countries. How are they related?
Yeah, so I mean, I think kind of in my mind, I mean, I see these two trends happening simultaneously, right? You have a big shift from a data privacy standpoint and how digital advertisers are reaching consumers right now, which are cookies that are sunsetting in 2024. Couple that with a changing demographic. So, I mean, the most recent census in 2020 clearly shows that multicultural consumers are growing, both from immigration standpoint, but also just from natural births. And actually in the US, for the first time in our country's history, like non-Hispanic whites are not growing in size, they're actually declining. So that's a pretty stunning statistic. And so, I mean, how they're related is like marketers have to grapple with these two paradigm shifts at once. And I feel like a lot of marketers might see it as like a scary thing, but I actually think as an opportunity for us to kind of think in a fresh, innovative way of how to address both of these changes in a new way. So I think one is zero-party data that is not reliant on cookies. And at the same time, when gathering that data, you are complying to a lot of the new data regulations out there. And by nature of just gathering that data, it gives you the opportunity to tap into multicultural consumers, right? Relying on zero-party data where you're explicitly asking people what their preferences are allows you to tap into this new multicultural consumer at the same time.
Yeah, are there any particular biases that are going to be, I guess, thrown out for the better as part of this change?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the new things, or not new things, I mean, I think one of the things that are emerging in marketing, and this has been not only propelled by multiculturalism, but also just digital advertising, is like there's no such thing as one message for all. I think younger consumers are all about brands that speak to their specific values. And what's great about the internet is that it enables us to get as niche as we want, right? So we can talk to Latino gamers in California that are also skateboarders, right? Like that's a cool intersectionality that, 10, 20 years ago, it was maybe too specific for advertisers and marketers to reach, but now with the internet, you're able to reach them. So I think that's like kind of in broad strokes, the best thing to come out of it is like nothing is too niche. And I see this as an opportunity to authentically engage with consumers, like no matter how niche you think it may be.
Well, very true. So now we've got a good baseline for the conversation. Do you mind just sharing a little about ThinkNow and your areas of expertise?
Yeah, so ThinkNow, we started in 2011, so it's been like 12 years now. And it has always been the same mission. We are focused on researching and understanding multicultural consumers in the US, utilizing technology. So we believe that for companies to be able to future-proof themselves and grow, they need to understand the new diverse multicultural consumers. So we give them a variety of tools to be able to engage and understand this consumer. So we do full service market research. We own and operate a panel. And then most recently, we have our zero-party data product Audiences that enables digital marketers to target those specific personas I was mentioning through the whatever DSPs that they're using. So we're making that data available across, the Trade Desk, MediaMath, Google DV360, utilizing our surveys, utilizing our panelists, and allowing digital marketers to create specific personas that better resonate with the new multicultural consumer.
So how can audiences, like you just mentioned, help us better reach and understand our world in this cookieless environment that we're living in now?
Yeah, what's nice about Audiences, it's not reliant on cookies, right? So even though cookies haven't gone away, you can start to utilize Audiences and other types of products that rely on zero-party data to start seeing, how does this work against some of the other cookies that we've been utilizing in the past? I think one of the reasons that this 2023 and 2022 deadline has been pushed is that marketers have yet to find an alternative. And like in any industry or in any person, kind of afraid of change. So Audiences enables you to start toying around with the idea of a cookieless future. So that's one, is we're addressing that. And then two, we're able to target race and ethnicity through self-identification. Race and ethnicity targeting online has been a sticky subject for many companies because they've relied on different signals to determine your race and ethnicity. And so I think a great example, since we just had the Grammys, right? Bad Bunny, Bad Bunny being one of the top artists, I think the top streamed artist of last year, Spanish language artist, relying on data like cookies. If you are somebody that listens to Bad Bunny, you're going to assume that from a digital marketing standpoint, that this person is Spanish speaking and Latino, but we know that many non-Spanish speaking people are listening to Bad Bunny. So I think that's an example of how zero-party data, explicitly asking someone how they identify is much more accurate than kind of assuming someone's language preferences or ethnicity based on actions they may take, like listening to Bad Bunny.
After being in the consumer market research space for over a decade now, how do you think launching a digital media product like Audiences has helped overcome the challenges of a cookieless world?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's great about this product is that for us, it wasn't reinventing the wheel. We realized after being a decade doing research that we're sitting on really valuable data. We do a lot of thought leadership, and we publish that. That typically gets made into a PowerPoint and a PDF that people download. And we came up with Audiences because we realized like that data has such a short lifespan, right? Once that PDF is published and someone downloads it, it might be useful for a month or two. And so we started thinking about, well, how can survey data address a cookieless world? And we realized that if we utilize survey data, our multicultural panel, and regularly research people, that we can give media buyers not only accurate data, but data that's GDPR, CCPA compliant, and at the same time, help them reach multicultural consumers that are very difficult to reach right now on online platforms. So Facebook, for example, stopped ethnic targeting. A lot of the large platforms stopped because they were being misused. And so, we're able to circumvent that and provide high quality data there.
Mm. So, I mean, one of the things that's come from, or that's going to stem from the cookieless world is just the rise in importance of brand. So have you seen much influence or trends moving towards brands investing in their brand and understanding what the multicultural movement is impacting with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely brands that are investing heavily in social causes that multicultural consumers value. So many times they're thought leaders within their respective verticals. So I think Nike's a great example of that. Walmart, Target, Honda. These are all companies that have been investing in not only their brand, but multicultural consumers for the past decade. And I don't want to say that, they're successful just because of that. But I think a big part of their success is that they understood that multicultural consumers are critical for many reasons. Outside of that one, that's where the country is headed. But I think equally as important, multicultural consumers are also kind of, influencers in day to day, right? What multicultural consumers are into or value eventually become kind of general market, right? Or popular. I mean, I think Bad Bunny is a huge example of that. Like, reggaeton has been big in the Latin community for the past 10, 15 years. And that's something that's just starting to spill over into the mainstream, and we're going to see more and more artists. So yeah, I mean, I think brands, and I want to qualify by saying that it's never too late to start investing in multicultural consumers. I think we start to see after the events of 2020, a lot more brands start to realize how important multicultural consumers are. So, it's never too late to start investing in multicultural consumers and bolstering your brand among this generation.
I mean, authenticity is going to trump all of that, isn't it? So it can't be something that's seen just to be ticking boxes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and I think younger consumers are especially savvy at sniffing out inauthenticity. So yeah, it's got to be authentic.
So can you share a little about your passion for multicultural research, and just maybe some of the highlights that you've seen throughout your career with it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in the multicultural space for over 15 years. I think one of my favorite stories is our work that we did with Honda. Honda, as I mentioned, they've been investing in Hispanic consumers in the US for over a decade. And as such, they've are number one in terms of brand considerations of vehicle among US Hispanics. We helped them with some research. They launched a truck line, the Ridge line. They had assumed because Hispanics over-index in truck purchases, they are number one in brand consideration among Hispanics, that the Ridgeline was just going to be a great success. And unfortunately, when it launched, it didn't do so well. And so that's when they came to us to kind of understand what's going on. And instead of relying on, stereotypes or assumptions that they had, they came to us and said, look, we don't want to just understand why this particular, truck didn't do well. We want to get at, why do trucks over-index in the Hispanic community? And there are brands that you can that would maybe make assumptions in that situation, that more likely to have jobs that necessitate a truck or whatever it may be. But they actually did qualitative research among truck owners, both Hispanic and non-Hispanic in the U.S., to understand what's that driver. And so one of the things that we found was that we found a pain point among non-Hispanic truck owners, that one of the things that was difficult about them owning a truck is that they had, getting that phone call like, hey, Michael, what are you doing this weekend? Can you help me move? That was like a pain point, right? But the opposite was actually true for US Hispanics. They purchased trucks because they wanted to be that go-to person in their friend and family group when someone needed to move, when someone needed to haul some items, or whatever it may be. And that was a really cool insight. And so they took that insight and made a whole campaign about being the go-to person in the family. And so that was like an authentic insight that actually drove an increase in double-digit sales for the Ridgeline after that. Wow. And I think it's just like a great example of helping a brand not rely on stereotypes, get that cultural insight. That ultimately, like, I think the biggest reward is like you're helping a brand succeed, where it's a win-win. Like, the consumer that's watching that advertisement feels understood. There's that brand connection that ultimately led to sales.
And it is nice as well when the insight is relatively easily translated into a project or a program, rather than necessitating a huge new product launch or whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah.
Any other gems that you had? I mean, that was a pretty deep one, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we recently did some work with Meta, and this was personally rewarding. We did work among minority business owners. Meta knew from their internal data that businesses are launched, thousands of businesses every day on Facebook. And they realized that they saw a biggest growth from minority business owners. But they realized that once they launched in Facebook, there was scale was difficult, right? So Facebook is a great product in that the barrier to entry for a business is really low. You can start a Facebook page. You don't even need a website really anymore. Like you could just start a Facebook page and launch a company. But they wanted to help business owners grow. And so in order to do that, they wanted to understand what are those barriers. And so we helped them do research among minority business owners that were utilizing Facebook. I mean, and a personal passion of mine as an entrepreneur is helping other entrepreneurs, helping other minority entrepreneurs. So it was like a great melding of my passions, research, entrepreneurship. And so one of the biggest barriers that we found was cash, right? Like, many of the business owners that are launching kind of these micro businesses on the Facebook platform are not necessarily banked. They don't necessarily have the credit history to access capital to scale their businesses and grow. And so this is an insight that we found across the board. And so we presented that to Meta, and in response, they developed their own financial product within the Facebook platform that enabled small businesses to launch their business, access, access capital that they could utilize within the Facebook platform for things like advertising or accepting payments. So I think it was just like a really great initiative on multiple levels. Many businesses would have been deterred by hearing that they need cash, but given the scale of Facebook's ecosystem, they were able to address something like that. And I think that it was just like really rewarding to see them roll out something like that can really change people's lives.
And it's going to be really fascinating just to follow the, I guess, the outcomes of that as well. So in 10, 15 years, you look at those small little businesses that were given that helping hand, which would have basically been crumbs for Facebook as well, but made a huge impact.
Exactly.
Long term.
Exactly.
Nice. So I think we've covered a really good sway of points today. Just one final thing. Any advice to brands that are conducting research, so most of them, what advice would you give them just to be more sensitive, I guess, to multicultural research?
Oh, that's a big question. I'm gonna steal this insight from someone I had on my podcast because it's fresh on my mind. But just start. I think many brands are often don't invest in multicultural research for a variety of reasons, like fear. They've never done it before. They don't know how to put it together or understand it. Like it starts to get more complex as they start to think about the nuts and bolts in it. Like, do we talk, how many Hispanics do we talk to? Is Spanish language, African American, Asian? There's so many languages. And I've had conversations with insights managers and marketing people that they start to think of all the variables that they just like throw their hands up and continue to business as usual. I would say that just start and know that there's going to be mistakes made, and there's going to be some setbacks, but you're going to get learnings from that. And it's so much more important to get started in your multicultural research journey than to never do it, because down the line, you're going to have to do it and you're going to be regretting that you didn't start when you initially thought about it. So that would be my biggest advice, is just start.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so if I can recap what we've talked about today, some pretty big technology challenges that are facing us or the world, and particularly us as marketers as well. So the sunsetting of cookies, the rise in zero-party data, which a lot of researchers are actually familiar with all of the surveys, etc., that they've been doing, and the huge well, the way that the US and a lot of the world is becoming increasingly multicultural, and the two big trends are rising at the same time and are related. And so our practices do need to amend and adjust for that in order that we can properly understand the world around us. We had a little look about at ThinkNow and some of Mario's expertise in the world, particularly the length of multicultural research that he's been doing, and how that is responding now to in a cookieless world. We looked at audiences as well, and how that can be a great tool for helping brands to understand and navigate the various audiences and their market better as well, being a digital product too, which is good for access, etc. too. We also had a look at the importance of brand as well, and how people are needing to incorporate and be mindful of multicultural research, because as we're seeing, a multicultural society is no longer just one people group and others. It's everyone together. So yes, some very good points there. And then finally, we finished on just starting multicultural research, and we're going to build up a bank of research, which will be so beneficial in the long run. You'll have things to benchmark off and to move and iterate on. And I guess our brands, our products, our lives will be all the richer for it as well, as we understand the actual world around us, not the one that we think we're living in, if that makes sense. Anything else I missed there, Mario? Any final words?
No, great recap. We covered a lot.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.
You're welcome. And if you have liked what you've heard today, feel free to reach out to Mario at ThinkNow. There's a range of multicultural research skills, and as you've heard, that he can share with you and help guide your brand. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast, share it with others, and leave a review as well. Would be very appreciative of that. Thank you for listening to Now That's Significant.